Cognizant to the needs of our learners, parents, and teachers, the Department of Education provided us with powerful tools for productivity that will allow us to foster critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, communication and collaboration skills to be compassionate, responsible global citizens. Join us and discover new ideas in our series of professional development training program with the ICTS Edtech Unit and Microsoft Education Philippines. Together, we will equip our learners and empower our fellow educators for a dynamic future. Para sa bata, para sa bayan, at para sa guro. Sulong Edukalidad.
Magandang araw, Sir Wilbur po, at your service. Narito ang ETUlay upang gabayan ka sa inyong pag-aaral upang lubos na maunawaan ang iba't ibang paksa o subject. Ang ETUlay ay isang free online tutorial class na pinangungunahan ng ICTS Educational Technology Unit sa pamumuno ni Undersecretary Elaine Del P. Pascua. Ang programang ito ay hindi lamang para sa mga bata, kundi ito rin ay magsisilbing gabay sa mga magulang at mga guro kung paano nila ituturo o gagabayan sa bawat asignatura ang kanilang mga anak o mga estudyante. Sa kasalukuyan, ang self-learning module mula sa rehiyon ng Calabarzon at kilala sa tawag na pivot ang ginagamit sa ating ETUlay online class. Kaya ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Ihanda na ang inyong mga ballpen o lapis, papel o kwaderno at samahan kaming itulay ang pagkatuto para sa bawat batang Pilipino. Sama-sama tayong magtutulungan para malampasan ang mga hamon sa panahong ito. Halina't matuto kasama ang inyong online tutor sa oras na ito.
All right, so good afternoon, dear learners, parents, and of course, sa ating fellow teachers, kumusta po kayo? And welcome to our ETUlay online tutorial for the subject English 9. We are on the 4th week of 3rd quarter, and our topic is all about judging the validity of the evidence from a text. Kumusta po kayo? You may comment down your location. Ano bang pangalan ninyo? Anong pangalan ng school ninyo? You may comment down it, okay? All right, so I am your tutor for English 9. My name is Tutor Jester. And live po tayo sa different Facebook pages and YouTube account ng Department of Education. Okay? All right, so i-acknowledge muna natin ang ating ginagamit na self-learning module and our SLM came from the SDO Pasig. Thank you so much po sa writer, kay Ma'am Corazon M. Arbasto, sa editor, si Ma'am Rochelle Asaitono, and to all the development team of the self-learning module ng SDO Pasig. Marami pong salamat. Okay, so from DepEd Angeles and Francisco G. Nepomuceno Memorial High School, headed by Sir Hermes Vargas, we got a viewer from that place, from Angeles, Pampanga yata ito. We got Aid Sanchez. Maraming pong salamat. Okay. So, in our previous lesson, we have discussed the verbal and the non-verbal cue. Natatandaan niyo pa ba? What's the meaning of the verbal and non-verbal cue? At paano ito gamitin or for what so? Do you still remember? What is it? Or what it is? Okay? So, when we say verbal cue, yung pasalita, tama ba? Pasalita. It is a prompt that is conveyed in spoken language. Nga, pasalita. Pakipag-conversation natin from one person to another or a group of people. Example na lamang, of course, kapag may nagpapa-webinar or seminar, yung priest, pag nagpi-preach, pag nag-a-attend tayo ng mass, and many other examples of verbal cues. Okay. What about non-verbal cue naman? It is the transfer of information through the use of our body language, yan, including our eye contact, our facial expressions, even yung ating mga gestures, yan, and many others. Okay? Watching from Muzon Elementary School, 5 Sagittarius, si Jeneline Diamante. Oy, Jeneline, please share this live video sa kaklase mo, sa Facebook wall mo, para mas maraming ma-reach ang ating ETUlay online tutorial. Specifically, we are English 9. Ayan, iba't talagang mga learners natin, ano, even elementary and high school nanonood sa atin. Pero specifically, sabi ko nga, this is an English 9 session. Okay, so let's begin. At the end of the lesson, you are expected to, number one, evaluate the validity of a text and use evidences to support claims and arguments. Okay? All right. So, from the lesson title itself, our lesson would be on focusing on judging the validity of the evidence from a text. Ngayon, how can we judge the validity of a text? And before answering that question, let us first have this activity. Arrange the letters to form a word in each item. Okay? All right. So, meron tayong four items. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So number one, the word begins with letter C. So number two naman, as well as for number two, begins with letter C again. So number three begins with letter E, and number four begins with letter V as in victory. So what do you think is the answer for numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4? You may comment your answers with put the number and the word. Okay? Watching from SDO Quirino, Caloocan Integrated School, si Ma'am Lovelyn Velasco. Okay? Watching from National High School, Province of Cagayan. Uy, kumusta kayo sa Cagayan? Parang hinahakip ko ng bagyo ang Cagayan as of this moment. Pero, magdasal lamang. Okay? Malalampasan uli yan. Katulad ng nangyari last year, you would be able to overcome it. Okay? All right. So, we have answers na from our comment box. According to Hazel Dupaya, number one, claim. Okay, ganun din ang answer ni Elizabeth Mapes Satoya. Let's see if your answer is correct. And that is indeed correct. Very good, ha? Salamat po sa sumagot. Your answer is correct. It's claim. For number two, ano kaya? The answer of Jacelyn is sight. Oh, kumiyok pa ako. Answer of Jacelyn is sight. As well as the answer of Jugs and Nicole. Yan. As well as Lynn's answer. Very good, ha? Very active and participative ang ating learners. And makikita ko not only learners are watching, not only learners are participating, but also our teachers nakikisagot din. Okay, so for number two, we got sight. Okay, now let's move on with number three. It begins with letter E. What do you think is the answer for this? English 9 teacher po ako from Misamis Oriental General Comprehensive High School. Si Ma'am, sino ba to? Si Ma'am or si Sir Dubs? Jandy or Handy. Good afternoon po. Thank you so much. And please do patronize this ETUlay online tutorial by sharing our live session. Okay. May makakasama tayo later on, ha? Parang mag-explain further ng ating topic. Okay. Ma'am Jessica answered evidence, and you got it correct. It's evidence, and for the fourth one, number four, what do you think is our word for number four? It's indeed validity. You get it right, learners. Palakpakan ng sarili if you were able to get a correct answer. So, hindi naman, okay lang yan. We still got activities later on. So we got the words claim, cite, evidence, and validity. So isa-isahin natin yan. So from the first word, we got claim. Ano ba yung claim? Tinatawag natin. When we say claim, is defined as a statement that a person asserts as yung totoo or yung true. Yung truth. Yung pawang katotohanan lamang. Okay? Lahat ng kanyang sinasabi ay tunay or totoo. Okay? What about for number two? Yung cite naman. Cite is a verb which means to state a source or provide an example. Providing an example daw to support a certain response. For number three naman, yung evidence. Alam na alam nyo to, no? Most of you are watching before, dati. Yung soko may ebidensya, di ba? For number three, evidence refers to information that supports yung ating claim. And for the fourth one, we got validity. Validity refers to statements that can be described, pwedeng, yun nga, it can be described as true or yung real. Yun nga, valid eh. Okay, from the word itself, from the root word itself, valid. Dapat pawang katotohanan lamang. Okay? All right. So, let's proceed. Yung aking nabanggit kanina, we have a special guest to further explain our topic. All right, so let's have this scenario, an example of an argument. Jason's family is going to the mall, but he doesn't want to go. He argues that he should follow or that he should be allowed to stay home and says that his friend Ray often stays at home alone. Now, based on the argument and evidence in that scenario dun sa ating text sa binasa, should Jason be allowed to stay at home? Sa tingin ninyo, should Jason be allowed to stay at home? Now, this is a challenge. I want you to reserve your answers and I will read those later. Okay? Ayan. So, reserve nyo lang ang answers nyo and I will be reading those later mamaya. Okay? Let's proceed. What makes a claim valid? And these are the things that makes a claim valid. Number one, it is true. Number two, nandun sa topic. Third is reasonable daw. Fourth, logical. Fifth, can be supported and it is indeed important. Okay. Now, what is an evidence? Ano ba yung evidence na tinatawag natin? Online, you may key in your answers kung nais nyo magsagot. Okay? So, evidence is a proof, pruweba. It is the basis of your belief, an indication of something. The evidence is a support, and these are all yung katotohanan or yung facts. Dapat ang evidence na inilalatag natin are all facts. Next, we got, how can we define naman a valid evidence? So, valid evidence is always true. Gaya ng aking nabanggit kanina. It is reasonable information based on facts and supports an argument. For the third question, how can we ensure that we have a valid evidence naman? So when we cite the source of our proof, or we need to provide an acceptable example to support our claim. Okay? All right. Now, gaya nga nung nabanggit kanina, yung ating scenario a while ago, balikan natin yung argument. Let's try to answer this. Jason's family is going to the mall, but he doesn't want to go. He argues that he should be allowed to stay at home and says that his friend, yung daw kaibigan niyang si Roy, ay often stays at home alone. Now, based on the argument and the evidence in that scenario, should Jason be allowed to stay home? Huh? Sa tingin ninyo? Sa tingin nyo, online people, should Jason be allowed to stay at home based sa kanyang sinabi dun sa scenario, based sa kanyang explanation? Naalala ko tuloy yung linya ni na Tony Gonzaga and Piolo Pascual sa one of the Star Cinema movies. Kung nagkakamali, the title is Starting Over Again. May line dun si Piolo Pascual, I need an acceptable reason. Parang ganon, ano? Not exactly, pero parang ganon. Okay. All right. So, was Jason able to provide a valid evidence on his claim to support his argument for staying home alone? Base dun sa scenario? Yes or no ba? And please do explain your answers. Sige nga, online. Yeah, you're right, Ma'am Jessica. I deserve an explanation. I deserve an acceptable reason. Yan linya ni Piolo Pascual doon. So, no daw according to Jessica, somewhat lacking kulang. So Jason failed to provide valid evidence. His reason was not enough and he missed citing an acceptable source or example to support yung kanyang claim. So kulang talaga. Hindi niya na suportahan yung kanyang claim. Hindi niya na bigyan ng iba pang mga dahilan or yung further explanation. Kaya kulang, and by that, hindi siya mapapayagan for sure. Okay? All right. Now, here are the kinds of evidence in an argument. The first one is direct evidence. It isn't any piece of evidence that stands alone to prove an argument. So, halimbawa na lamang ito, learners, grade 9 learners. Kunyari mayroong naganap na sunog, iniimbestigahan na. Kung merong sunog na naganap at merong witness na kung sino may sala, if witness if a witness says he saw the accused set fire to a building. So, ganun merong nakakita. Merong, kumbaga, not totally the evidence, but yung witness itself, yung ating direct evidence doon. Merong nakakita sa pangyayari. Okay? Next, we got the indirect and circumstantial evidence. It is a set of facts that, when taken together, lead to the desired conclusion. Example, doon pa rin sa ating na bigay ng example kanina, if the witness saw the accused sneakily leaving the building just before the fire broke out, kumbaga, may hint na nagli-lead doon sa conclusion. Okay? That's the indirect and circumstantial evidence. For number 3, okay, let's proceed with the next one. So where can we get these pieces of evidence? Saan daw natin makukuha ang pieces of evidence ito? Kasi nga, when we use evidence in your argument, we need to make sure it comes from this one, a reliable na sources. Sa reliable source na lang ha. So mga legit, ika nga sa mga terms ng mga millennials, legit na sources sa social media, sa ganyan. So possible sources of evidence are, example, yung ating mga dyaryo, newspapers natin, mga magazines, meron pa rin mga magazines ngayon, no? Official documents, historical papers, news organizations or statements made by mapagkakatiwalaang tao or trustworthy public officials or even yung mga private persons or yung mga witness natin. According to Ma'am Jessica, no justification at all. Okay. All right. News, according to Tutor Jessica. You got it right. Now, ito, real or fake news? Gaya ng aking nabanggit kanina, we have a special guest from the Manila Bulletin, DigiDocs, para explain sa atin on how to identify real and or fake news. We got Mr. Mark Villaluna, the executive producer of Manila Bulletins, MB DigiDocs. Good afternoon po, Sir Mark Villaluna.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me well. Thank you for
Yes,
inviting
sir.
me here.
Very clear po. Okay, sir. Sige po, pwede po kayong bumati muna sa ating mga online learners and our parents and fellow teachers po. Then, we may proceed po sa ating pag-answer ng ating question on paano ba namin ma-identify yung real at saka yung fake news po, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. First of all, I would like to greet everyone, all the online learners, the teachers, and the parents who are here with us today in this episode of DepEd's ETUlay with Sir Jester. Ayan. And I'll be here to help you out with understanding how we can spot misleading or false information, what people sometimes label fake news. Yeah. Sir,
Yes, sir. So,
proceed
yung
lang ako.
question natin. Yes, sir. Please
Okay.
proceed na po.
Sige. So, how do we identify real news versus fake news? I would like to start with helping our online learners understand the term misinformation or false information, because we in the mass media who are working professionally as journalists or as mass media practitioners, we don't really use the term fake news because it gives a lot more of confusion to the people, because it connotes or it brings to us the idea that news can be fake, which is not true, huh? Uh, we don't use the term fake news because it's confusing. If it's fake, it can never be news. So that's the first point that I want us to understand, that if it's fake, if the information is fake, then it cannot qualify as news, because the core of news stories, or the core of news itself, is to be truthful, to be based on facts, and verified and reliable information. So I think the better term to use is misinformation or false information, instead of using fake news as a term. Okay, so how do we spot, or how do we identify false information or misinformation online, especially now that we are using a lot of social media, and it is the internet and the digital media that is now the primary source of our news and information. So I will share with you three steps, or three things that you will need to consider or look into when we strive to identify false information or misinformation online. So the first thing is looking at the source. The second consideration is looking at the content itself, yung nilalaman noong information. And the third is looking at the way the website, or whatever digital platform it is designed, no, yung itsura nung mismong website na pinuntahan natin para doon sa specific information na iyon. So puntahan natin yung una. The first one is the source. So obviously, the first thing that we need to verify when we are looking at information online, for us to identify whether it's legitimate information or false information, is looking at the source. Kanina, Sir Jester was explaining to us, di ba? The need to cite sources, the need to bank or tap reliable sources for the information that we will include in our arguments, or in our claims. The same thing with information online. So how do we look for the sources? How do we verify the sources? So most of the time, okay, false information come from unreliable sources. Meaning to say, these are sources that does not fall under any of the legitimate news organizations, any government organizations, or non-government organizations that are experts or that are authorities in the field where the information is related to. So, for example, if we are, say, for example, looking at information related to the pandemic, di ba, the health crisis that we are experiencing now, obviously, we will be looking for information that are authorities or experts in the medical field. So reliable sources for that topic would be the World Health Organization, the Department of Health, bulletins, advisories, official government documents, research works, studies related to it, coming from reputable educational institutions, no, and of course, news organizations. Organizations here in the Philippines, such as um, ABS-CBN, GMA, CNN Philippines, these are legitimate news organizations because they have been built uh, with credibility from the very beginning. No, newspapers like Philippine Daily Inquirer, Manila Bulletin, Philippine Star, they have a tradition of upholding truth and excellence in the field of information dissemination and journalism. So we can rely on them. Another thing for us to check whether the sources are reliable is to look at verified accounts. So obviously,
Ayun.
these organizations, whether they are government organizations, non-government organizations, or media organizations, they have online accounts, right? In Facebook, in Twitter, in YouTube, and we have to check if the accounts are verified. So if you notice, if you go to Facebook, the let's say for example ABS-CBN, the Facebook account of ABS-CBN, the official one, has a blue check mark beside its logo or name. And that tells you that Facebook has verified that that is the official Facebook page of ABS-CBN. The same thing with Manila Bulletin and other organizations. Journalists themselves have verified accounts. So if we look at, say, for example, specific reporters like Ms. Shara Zambrano or Mr. Jeff Canoy, their online Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, also has that blue check to tell us that that is a verified account. That is the real account of that reporter or of that organization. Now, obviously, the information that they will be sharing in their official accounts have been vetted. No, that's the term, vetted, meaning they have been verified as quality and reliable information. Another thing that we have to consider when we look at sourcing, no, whether the sources are reliable, is to look at the date when the information was posted, first or posted or disseminated. Sometimes misleading information or false information can happen because of taking the information out of context, no? Masyado ng luma yung information or lumutang lang ulit yung lumang post dahil related siya sa isang bagay or issue na pinag-uusapan ngayon pero hindi naman talaga siya direct related information to the issue at hand. So it's very important that when we look at sources, we also look at the date when the initial post, the original post was posted. Okay, so that's the first one. We look at the source. The second consideration is to look at the content itself. How was it written? No, the structure of the sentences, the use of grammar. It's a red flag most of the time if the way the article or the information was written is not of good quality. There are a lot of grammatical flaws, sentence construction errors, spelling. These should be indications that the information that was being posted is not really reliable. Because if they come from legitimate sources, like what I mentioned a while ago, uh, the articles are more polished, and we don't only have fact checkers, but we also have stylistic checkers for the articles that we are published. May mga proofreaders yan, may mga copy editors yan who ensure that the article is free of any factual and grammatical error. So pag madaming mali sa pagsulat, sa pagbuo ng mga pangungusap, sa mga spelling, that should be an indicator na, teka muna, I think the information is not reliable. At the same time, we have to go beyond the headlines. Sometimes we just look at the headlines, no? And most of the time, legitimate sources of information do not use clickbaits. If you notice, if you go to the official websites of the media organizations in the Philippines, they always use explanatory headlines, yung active voice headlines kung tawagin natin. Sometimes they use clickbaits for feature type articles, but most of the time for national news or news that has a national of national importance, we use more formal headlines or active voice headlines. So we look into that and we don't stop at that. We try to read at least the first three paragraphs of the article. And there we will see whether the information being delivered are legitimate or not. Why? Because the articles would cite first-hand or primary information. They will cite statistics, information from research works or studies. And that's what we call attribution. So if an article online that we read attributes other sources, experts in the field, then most probably that piece of information is reliable and it's not a type of misinformation. So we look at the internal structure of the article, no, yung nilalaman. No, meron bang yung author ba ay may inilagay na evidence, no, to support the claims or to support the main ideas in the article. What did he or she attribute specific sources who are experts in the field or who are persons of authority in the field or in the issue that he or she is talking about or writing about. And then lastly, we look at the overall look or design of the website or whatever digital platform we may source our information online. So we have to familiarize ourselves with the look of the official logos of the media organizations, because sometimes there are ill-intentioned people or groups who try to make websites that look like legitimate news websites,
I
and
see.
they copy the logos, no, even the quality, for example, of the art cards, of the quote cards, di ba usong-uso yan ngayon sa social media, yung paggamit
Yes,
ng
sir.
mga quote cards. Even the quality, no, pixelated yung picture, hindi maganda yung design. Those are indications really that, wait, maybe the information or the Facebook page or the website that posted this information is not really reliable. So we look at the general design as well of the websites, because more legitimate organizations have better websites, no, better looking websites, and we seldomly use low quality graphics or low quality pictures to accompany our reports. Yeah. So it's good to keep in mind these three things: the source, the content itself, and the design or the look of the online platform or digit or website that we are visiting for our information.
Ayun, sir.
Yun
Thank you so
lang.
much. Meron pa pong idadagdag? Thank you so
Okay na,
much
sir.
po. Parang we must be wise enough in identifying the news. Parang, yun nga, sabi nga ni Sir Mark, it's not actually the term of fake. Kasi kapag fake, it's not a
Mm.
news. Di ba? Okay, so online, you may ask questions po kay Sir Mark. You still have time naman eh. Anyway, makakasama pa naman natin si Sir Mark, and may questions kayo, Sir Mark will try to answer your questions. Okay. All right. So, we got here the bonus tip. Samahan mo na ako, Sir Mark, ha? As
Sige po,
ilang minuto
sir.
na
No
lamang naman
problem.
tayo. Samahan mo na ako, sir. So, we got here the bonus tip. Kung meron ka mang naisidagdag, sir, pwede kayong sumingit. So, we have the prove it. We have the passage, the passage, paragraph, the page, R for reference, O for over support, view for the view of author, E for I can see it, I for inference, and T for the texture. So isa-isahin natin yan. So kapag passage daw, the evidence must be found somewhere in the passage. It could just be in the one paragraph, several places throughout the passage. Sometimes the best supporting piece of evidence comes later in the text. Kapag reference naman, alam naman natin yan, mga sources, sa specific location ng text. Halimbawa, it says in the paragraph, on this specific page, on that line, ganyan. So offer support, the connection between the question and the evidence. Example, I know because, the reason I think, because, like that. Mga pwede natin gamitin mga lines. For view of author, provides the author's perspective on the topic. Example, the author stated that. For instance, the author says, yan. For letter E, I can see it, or eyes can see it. Something that is seen physically in the text. So in the text, pwede natin gamitin to. In the text, it explicitly states that the text said, ganyan. Sige nga, online, meron pa ba kayong questions? Okay, for the I, inference, be a reading detective, use clues from the text to figure something not stated in the text. Example, I can infer from or that. For T, for text picture, it helps the reader understand the text. It also somewhat watches out for the titles, the headings, charts, tables, paragraph or graphs. I mean, illustrations. You may use this. The illustration shows, the graph showed or shows based on the section according to the title or what so. Okay, so let's move on. So, Sir Mark, meron pa tayong mga questions dito. You may answer din po. So, how can
Sure.
one tell if something or someone tells you a fact or opinion? Nabanggit nyo na kanina, Sir Mark, pero kindly pwede natin i-expound po, sir.
Okay. So the way to distinguish fact from fiction um, is to look at the data or the information itself or the statement itself. No, facts are generally proven, whether by means of study, research, or scientific process. These are generally proven statements. No? For example, scientifically proven that uh, the COVID-19 the coronavirus affects many different parts of the body, including the heart, and it heavily affects people with comorbidities. So that's a fact because that has been proven scientifically in the medical field. No, opinions are statements that rests on our personal view of the issue. There are people, for example, who opine or who offer an insight that using face shields do not really help solve or do not really help us protect ourselves
From the
from the
virus.
virus. While there are other sectors who say that face shields are helpful. So for that, those are opinions still. But for that to become fact, there must be a study done, no, scientifically to prove the effectiveness of using face shields kung nakakababa ba talaga ito ng case ng for example ng sakit ngayon na dinaranas natin. So uh, that's how we try to look into the information or the statements that are being given to us. So if they are generally scientifically proven statements, they're facts, and we use them as basis to support our personal insights, our views of the matter, which are opinions. No? And mahalaga itong dalawang to, ha? Hindi siya, mas mahalaga yung fact kesa sa opinion. Both are
So,
important. Yes.
so meron nakalagay dito by going online to check the primary source. So, pero not all naman sa internet ay true din po ba?
Mm.
So, sabi nga kanina, we should rely on the legitimate sources. Let's move on with the number two. What primary sources might be credible? Yun nga, someone who experienced the situation personally, research, statistics office for census, the police department, and yun nga, legitimate news organizations gaya ng ABS-CBN News, yung Manila Bulletin kung saan kinabibilangan ni Sir Mark. Number three are newspapers and television news, always valid. Sir, pwede bang konting
Mm.
sharing about this? Are newspapers and television news always valid? So for me, tama naman palagi.
Mm.
Sir, meron ba kayong idadagdag dyan?
Ako, the validity of the news that not just television and newspapers, but also other organizations, because we have digital news agencies. No, they are always valid because
Okay.
they go through a vetting cycle.
Yun.
One one thing that the public, our learners, have to know is a piece of information published by a media organization goes through a very strict process of corroboration, vetting of information. Hindi yan basta-basta kinuha lang ng reporter tapos nagustuhan ng editor and then pinublish or inere na agad. No, dumadaan yan sa proseso ng pag-edit, pag-fact check, cross-referencing sa pool of data na kinuha din ng mga researchers doon sa loob ng organization because we have in-house research teams. So binabangga yung mga pieces of information na nakuha ng reporter sa field doon sa mga na-research din sa loob ng newsroom. So paano ba nagkakaroon ng kulay or sabihin nating unreliable reporting sometimes? That goes down now to the intention and the motivation of the writer or the journalist. No, kaya din tayo bilang mamamahayag, bilang journalists, we study what we call media ethics or journalistic ethics. And we follow specific principles to ensure that our reporting will always bring the people closer to the truth. Yun lang naman lagi yung core ng pagbabalita ng bawat journalist.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir. Number 4, is the internet always a good source of factual information? Why or why not? Precisely, some information that is passed through cyberspace is opinion based on very few facts. We need to verify first the information and check valid sources before forwarding such information. Yan, Sir Mark, time na tayo. Marami pong salamat para sa pagsama sa akin sa ating English 9 online tutorial. Sana makasama pa rin namin ikaw sa mga susunod nating mga topics. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So every Tuesday po ang ating Choose English Day. Kung mapapansin nyo, nagtatagalog si Sir Jester para mas maunawaan pa ng ating mga learners. Okay. Alright. So, it's time for me to say goodbye. Susunod na po. Up next, we got Tutor Maribel for the English 10. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Sigurado ako na marami ka na namang natutuhan sa ating ETUlay tutorial session ngayong araw. Tandaan, ito ay hindi lamang para sa ating mga mag-aaral, kundi pati rin sa ating mga minamahal na guro at mga magulang na kaagapay natin para maituloy ang pagkatuto sa kabila ng nararanasang pandemya. Patuloy ding sumubaybay sa DepEd TV para sa mga araling ginawang video episodes. Mapapanood ito mula Lunes hanggang Sabado, alas 7 ng umaga hanggang alas 7 ng gabi sa inyong mga telebisyon. Abangan bukas mula 1:00 ng tanghali ang iba pang aralin sa ating ETUlay free online tutorial session sa Filipino. I-like and subscribe at manatiling nakasubaybay sa ating ETUlay tutorial session sa DepEd Edtech Unit FB page at Educational Technology Unit channel sa YouTube at sa DepEd Tayo at DepEd Philippines social media accounts. Paalam!